guys, this is Lachette with Scarlet Moon Creations, and I'm back for this new video. This is a new type of video that I hope to put out somewhat regularly this year in 2019. And let's call this the Magical Librarian series. As you know, I am a witch, and my business, Scarlet Moon Creations, is kind of creating magical things to help other people. And one of the things that I enjoy immensely, if you haven't noticed in the past year specifically, is reading, reading books. And I have always wanted to talk more about the books I've read, and in particular for you guys and for this series, I want to talk about books that can help you magically or with your craft, or just with a pagan or magical influence. And the idea kind of came from various sources, but we'll focus on the reason why I'm calling this the Magical Librarian series. That is because about 6 or 7 years ago, I created a website or blog called The Magical Librarian, where it's... I hate to put it like this, because this was in the early days of Goodreads, I think. On Goodreads, people do put pagan books, magical books, occult and esoteric books, but not a lot. And I wanted to kind of hyper focus on that area of books and create a place where others who are interested in those topics, in those books, can submit reviews to get a better idea of what's in each book. The reviews on Goodreads tend to be very general and generic, and by that I mean this book is about this, or let's say this is a book about Lunasa, and it has a lot of recipes and rituals in it that are great for Lunasa, and that's pretty much it. There are some people who are more detailed reviewers, but not very much. So anyway, I created the Magical Librarian. It was part of a somewhat end of the year project for my years of learning about paganism and witchcraft, and it kind of didn't go very far because at the time I did not have the community. My pagan witchcraft occult community connections were very small. I was still relatively new to the craft and to the community. Now it's been over 10 years and I definitely have a lot more connections and more outlets such as this YouTube channel. So I'm not going to put every review I'll be sharing on the Magical Librarian here. I'm not going to make a video for each one, but I will attempt to have one video a month for books I think other witches and pagans would enjoy. And I'm sorry. Okay, so the first book I'm going to talk about in my Magical Librarian series is probably going to be a bit of a surprise, but I mentioned this book in my Witchathon wrap-up video, and it is Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. And this is a library book, that's why it's so shiny and reflective. And if you can see, I have a ton of like notes and post-its and stuff, and so I'm not gonna go in that much detail about each note I made, each thought I had, But I'm just gonna go over like what the book is about, give you some highlights, and then talk about why I picked this for my Magical Librarian series, which is focused on books for pagans and those interested in paganism, witchcraft, and the occult. And the reason I picked this is because this book wound up being a whole lot more magical than I thought. And I feel way too close to the camera. Hold on. There we go. Now I have some breathing room. So there are like some really like pagan elements in this, which I was not expecting. This falls more into the self-help, self-improvement category of books, as Elizabeth Gilbert's other famous book, Eat, Pray, Love, falls into. And she wrote this just kind of as a way to get her thoughts about how she feels about creativity down on paper, and published it. And I just really like it. I love this color. It simultaneously reminds me of like watercolor, but also paint powders, or paintballs, like when they splatter on you. This book is about this book is about Elizabeth Gilbert's ideas of what creativity is, how we get it, her points of view about how you need to think and feel and act to live a creative life. And first of all, like, she puts out there that creativity, living a creative life is not, you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to have a career in, or the aspirations to have a career in one of the arts, like dance or writing or music or painting or anything like that. Her idea of creative living is just to create in some way in your life. And just to go over like some of the highlights, what I did when annotating this book is, at first I just did like the post-it notes, like, oh, that's a thing that I want to remember. And then I went in and color coded each thing I posted with paper clips. And I have like this box of multiple colored paper clips. And so like right off the bat, the book starts off with a quote, before we even get into the chapters or sections. And it says, what is creativity? The answer: the relationship between a human being and the mysteries of inspiration, which automatically I love. Like, that in a nutshell is kind of what this book is about. And then we go into the chapters, I guess. So the way this book is put together is, right after that quote, we have, well, parts, I guess. There are 6 parts, 7 parts, 6 parts. And they are courage, enchantment, permission, persistence, trust, and divinity. And these are all of the things that Elizabeth Gilbert believes you need to live a creative life beyond fear. And then within each section, she has, like, I guess they would be chapters. This is not your traditional book format or fiction book format anyway. But also not your normal self-improvement book format. I haven't read tons, but I think just the way this is put together, it's more of a flow, stream of thought, stream of conscious, and she has anecdotes and also other people's stories, which she entitles like so and so chimes in, which I like. So there's some historical references and also stuff from her students and just other writers. A lot of her focus is on writing because that's what she does, but she does start off the book by saying you don't have to be a writer to live a creative life, basically. Let me find that. It's more about just being you. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Okay, so creative living defined is just the universe buries strange jewels deep within us all and then stands back to see if we can find them. And the hunt to uncover those jewels, that's creative living. The courage to go on the hunt in the first place, that's what separates a mundane existence from a more enchanting one. The big, often surprising results of that hunt, that's what I call big magic. So basically, she's saying, like in the first section of courage, it's be brave, otherwise your worth, you won't reach your potential. We each come into this world with a potential and maybe a purpose, if we want to be more specific and on the spiritual side of things. And if you're not brave, if you don't push yourself outside of your comfort zone, you won't reach that potential or you won't grasp that purpose. And in the courage section, as well as the quote that I had known of before this, again, I talked about that in my Witchathon wrap up, and it is a quote that I was taught to me when I was learning or I was practicing my handwriting with Bohoberry Cara Benz. She has a handwriting practice course, and it's a letter to fear. Dearest fear, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip together. I understand you'll be joining us because you always do. I acknowledge that you believe that you have an important job to do in my life and that you take your job seriously. Apparently, your job is to induce complete panic whenever I'm about to do anything interesting. And may I say you are superb at your job. So by all means, keep doing your job if you feel you must. But I will also be doing my job on this road trip, which is to work hard and stay focused. And creativity will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There's plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us to make yourself, so make yourself at home. But understand this, creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognize and respect that you are part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities. But still, your suggestions will never be followed. You're allowed to have a seat, and you're allowed to have a voice, but you are not allowed to have a vote. You are not allowed to touch the road maps. You are not allowed to suggest detours. You are not allowed to fiddle with the temperature. Dude, you're not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dearest old familiar friend, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. And that is amazing. So I want to talk about 10 magic moments in this book because it's, big magic. And I picked it because there are so many of these kind of pagan, magical, spiritual elements that I was not expecting. But as a witch, as a pagan, as someone who does magic and is very spiritual. I appreciated them. So obviously the whole enchantment section, the idea of ideas being these non-corporeal beings that want to work with you is totally magical. Big, giant magical moment, section number 1. Next, in the permission section, she talks about how she sees working with ideas, and how she gets over, things not working, things not going her way, the outcomes not being what she wanted. And she's like, she's not going to give up working. She gets joy just from figuring out the work in the first place. She sees like her constant writing every day, all the time, as a devotional path, and being true to that devotional path, in the meantime having other jobs and doing work. So it's like her devotional path was to write every day, to focus on writing, to give it the energy, the hard work, all the time. Well, not all the time, but every day, no matter what. And that was kind of her devotional practice. And having a devotional practice is difficult. It takes discipline, and persistence. And it's something that is a struggle, I think, particularly for neo-pagans today, because a lot of us are used to monotheistic religions where your devotions are told to you. You just have to kind of show up every so often, and the priest will kind of tell you what to do. There's a lot of repetitiveness, and these religions are religions. They're set up with these rules and things like prayers and stuff like that, and devotional practices that have been passed down for centuries, and they have structure where a lot of neo-paganism doesn't. You have to create your own structure, and it's difficult. But I love the idea of like creativity, creating something all the time as a devotional path. And next, in the beginning of the persistence section, is how Elizabeth like expounds on that, where she calls taking vows. She's like, when I was 16 years old, I took vows to become a writer. I mean, I literally took vows. The way a young woman of an entirely different nature might take vows to become a nun. She created her own ceremony, and she used her imagination and her passion. She lit a candle, got down on her knees, and swore her fidelity to writing. And her vows were very specific, and she didn't make a promise to become a successful writer, but to write. And not to become a great writer, or to have like she didn't make a goal of having a time for when she would be an official writer. She simply vowed to the universe that she would write forever, regardless of the result. And she would try to be brave about it and grateful, and she would never ask writing to take care of her financially, but she would take care of it. And she didn't ask for any external rewards, and that is right there. That's a very spiritual and magical idea, which I was just like, wow, 16, huh? Now I think that was the second or third. No, that was the third magical moment in this book. Fourth, the story I mentioned earlier about the gentleman who is Tristram Shandy, and he talks about getting dressed to appeal to the idea, to creativity. And it's also, to me, it's like glamour magic. You put on makeup, or you wear certain clothes or certain colors, or you to represent the magic that you want to bring into your life, and or the element you want to bring in your life, using these things as your magical tools. And that is a big part of Scarlet Moon Creations with the bath magic. You're using that as kind of your glamour, the oils, the salts, the herbs in the baths are what will either remove what you don't want in your life, or will bring in, help you bring in what you do want in your life. And that's the glamour magic of it. And also, in various spiritualities around the world, we dress for ritual, for spiritual workings, and for whatever divine beings people believe in, if they do. As also very similar in witchcraft to like cleansing and dedicating and dressing your altar space or your sacred space. And I just, again, like, wasn't expecting that. Fifth magical moment in the persistence section, talking about success. We go into the goddess, which is, there are patron goddesses for success and for creativity. She talks about the goddess of creative success, seeming like a rich, capricious old lady, and she just kind of defines and characterizes this goddess, and it's very similar to like the muses or specific gods that various artistic people over the centuries have dedicated their lives and creativity to, who have made vows to it. And it's kind of awesome to see that here in this book. The sixth moment we have is one teacher warning his students that they might be missing out on their potential to become co-creators of life. And this is more natural nature magic kind of thing. The exchange of love between earth and people calls forth the creative gifts of both. The earth is not indifferent to us, but rather calling for our gifts in return for hers. A reciprocal nature of life and creativity. And this is based off the idea of a lot. This Dr. Robin, she teaches environmental biology, and she starts off asking her students, oh, do you love nature? And they say yes. And then, do you believe nature loves you? And most of them say no, I guess because, we live in modern times, and a lot of what humans are doing to nature are not so great. So people think, that nature does not love us in return. And I like Dr. Robin's idea of the reciprocal relationship between nature and people. Now in the trust section, Elizabeth brings up trickster energy, and I'm a fan of trickster energy in various cultures. And she's like, the original human impulse for creativity is born out of trickster energy, but somehow I got kidnapped by martyrs that we should suffer. And she's like, the trickster is a charming and subversive figure, but they trust themselves, they trust their own cunning, and to a certain extent they trust other people, they trust in chaos and find it fascinating, and are okay with just like playing the game of life without expecting a specific outcome. They're just interested in the game and don't really care what happens. They just or are prepared to deal with whatever happens, I should say. And I have it like I vibe with this so hard as my little note. And let's see. And we have number 7 in the trust section, and you might spend your whole life following your curiosity and have absolutely nothing to show for it in the end except one thing. You will have the satisfaction of knowing you passed your entire existence in devotion to the noble human virtue of inquisitiveness. Being inquisitive, being curious, and following your curiosity as, again, another devotional path it resonates with me as well. It makes me feel more positive about my personality and being a curious person and always just like following that. So I just like that idea of just your own nature being a devotional path, spiritual path, whereas you don't have to change who you are, just be true to yourself. Then here's number 9, I believe. Don't, I'm sorry if my numbering's all over the place. I didn't actually put them down here. So again, in the trust section, it's like about your ego. This is a little bit more scientific in the kind of psychology, Jungian ideas of your ego. You shouldn't let it run the show, the same as you shouldn't let fear run the show. Left unmanaged, it will find disappointment when it doesn't get the rewards that it is expecting. And as that happens over and over again, then you just kind of become a disappointed wreck of a person. An unchecked ego is what the Buddhists call a hungry ghost, forever famished and eternally howling with need and greed. And again, kind of giving personification to your ego is, to me, very magical and spiritual thing. She says that her saving grace is that she tells herself, I know that I am not only my ego, I am also a soul, and I know my soul doesn't care a whit about reward or failure. Last magical section or point in this book, it's like, how do you shake off failure and shame in order to keep living a creative life? And she says, forgive yourself. If you made something and it didn't work out, let it go. Here we go. Whatever you do, try not to dwell on your failures. You don't need to know what anything means. You don't need rewards. Creativity is not obligated to explain anything to you. It's just use failure as energy or bait for your next creation, for your next idea. Someday it might make sense to you, but it doesn't necessarily have to now. And that is it. Oddly enough, not much happening in the divinity section of the book. There's a little story about Bali and the Balinese dance, and how sometimes spiritual things can be regular and mundane, and sometimes mundane and regular things can become spiritual and divine experiences, and we should just accept that. And I agree. So that is my first magical librarian video. I hope you enjoyed this. I tried to point out the big points of Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert and give you some ideas of the what I call magic moments or spiritual pagan moments in the book. And if it's something you would like to check out, do so. And I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think about this video and about the idea for this series in the comments. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if I'll have a book every single week. Every single month, I mean, but I will see. And it really just will happen. Some books will definitely be more obviously pagan and witchy and or occult, but others not so much. I hope you're looking forward to this series. Let me know, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.